One of the most important aspects to Marvel Studios when it comes to building the Marvel Cinematic Universe is consistency. There are a lot of balls to juggle when it comes to managing so many smaller franchises under one umbrella, and they all have to exist cohesively. For the most part, the MCU does a great job of this, even down to small details that are referenced or still have some effect many years later. However, this does not mean that everything is perfect. Of course, there are some inconsistencies that have slipped through the net. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, and here are the 10 most annoying little inconsistencies in MCU history. Number 10. Loki's true form. Since 2011, Loki has been brought to life by the wonderful Tom Hiddleston and has become nothing short of iconic over the years. By now, every MCU fan knows his story, that he was never Odin's trueborn son and that he was technically a frost giant taken from Jotunheim by the king of Asgard. Ever since, Loki used magic to alter his form to better fit in on Asgard. It wouldn't do to wander around his new home as a frost giant, so he essentially chose to look like Tom Hiddleston. His true form was glimpsed in Thor when holding the casket of ancient winters, and was seen properly in What If. However, it should have been seen far more throughout Loki on Disney+. When he was arrested by the TVA, naturally Loki tried to use magic to escape and deceive his kidnappers, but he was unable to. The power of the TVA rendered Infinity Stones useless, so Loki's tricks were never going to work. How then was he able to keep the magic needed to alter his form? If there was no magic allowed in the TVA at all, then Loki should have appeared in his natural frost giant form, rather than what audiences have come to get used to. Number 9. Thor's helmet. As the fourth ever hero introduced to the MCU and one of the 6 original Avengers, Thor is without question one of the most iconic and most popular characters the franchise can boast today, and is certainly one of the most instantly recognizable. Thor's very first scene in the Marvel Cinematic Universe saw him at his coronation, where he was to become King of Asgard. As befits such a ceremony, he wore his best garb, including his battle helmet that was such an important part of his aesthetic in the comics. He never wore this particular helmet again throughout the MCU, but 6 years later it was seen in Spider-Man: Homecoming. As a group of would-be thieves tried to rob a bank, they concealed their faces with Avengers masks, with Thor's depicting the God of Thunder wearing his helmet. The problem with this? At this point, Thor had been to Earth 4 times before. At no point during any of his time on Earth did he don his helmet, so how would anyone manufacturing a mask know to put it on him? Number 8. Thor's hair. Thor's helmet isn't the only time the God of Thunder's head has caused inconsistencies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The long flowing locks that were synonymous with the character until Thor Ragnarok have also raised questions. During Avengers Infinity War, Thor travelled to Nidavellir with Rocket and Groot in order to forge a Thanos-killing weapon. When they got there, however, the star was burned out, with no power left to run the forge needed to create Stormbreaker. In one of Thor's greatest shows of physical strength in the MCU yet, he pried and held open the rings in order to start things back up again. As Eitri warned him, he took the full force of the star. He suffered burns on his face, but apparently this wasn't enough to singe even one hair on his head. So Thor's hair is pretty indestructible then, right? Well, if that's the case, then how was Stan Lee's eccentric barber ever able to cut it against Thor's will on Sakaar? The power of Nidavellir couldn't so much as split a single strand, yet some madman with a pair of scissors could. Even if they were vibranium blades, this doesn't make sense. Number 7. The Stephen Strange name drop. Captain America the Winter Soldier is arguably the strongest outing in the MCU's Phase 2. While doing many other great things, it introduced Bucky as the Winter Soldier, Sam Wilson as Falcon, and made the first mention of Stephen Strange. This came 2 years before Doctor Strange ever actually made an appearance on screen himself. As Jasper Sitwell ran through Project Insight with Steve Rogers, he name-dropped several potential threats to Hydra that would be eliminated, namely Cap himself, Bruce Banner, and Stephen Strange. He did reel off several other hypotheticals, like a TV anchor in Cairo insinuating that it could be anybody, but Banner and Strange he called by name. Yet at this point in time, Doctor Strange was just that, a doctor. He was famous, certainly, but why on earth would he ever be considered a threat on the same level as Bruce Banner? Strange didn't even know of the existence of the mystic arts yet, and while he may well have been a potential threat, just like a TV anchor in Cairo, why was he one of the first names Sitwell came up with next to Bruce Banner? Surely a Tony Stark, a Hank Pym, or an Eric Selvig would have made much more sense. Number 6. Loki is D.B. Cooper. When it premiered on Disney Plus in 2021, Loki promised to be unique and unlike anything else the franchise had to offer. The most exciting prospect, of course, was the much further development that we would see of the God of Mischief in the spotlight, and any number of potential different versions of the character. One of the trailers showed Loki on a plane with short hair and sunglasses and was confirmed in the series to be D.B. Cooper, the infamous thief who disappeared with the money he stole. This ultimately had absolutely no impact on the story and was just a fun little side piece. Mobius loved the fact that Loki was D.B. Cooper, but Loki, almost out of character, seemed a little embarrassed by the episode of his life. He claimed that he was young and that he had lost a bet with Thor. This makes no sense. D.B. Cooper vanished in 1971, just over 40 years before the Battle of New York, from when the TVA nabbed Loki. As Asgardians have a lifespan of 5,000 years, give or take, Loki claiming he was young for something he did 40 years earlier would be like a human making the same claim as an excuse for something they did a week ago. Number 5. Different characters that look the same. For the most part, the casting crew of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done a stellar job. You could genuinely count on one hand the times actors haven't quite fit the roles they signed on for, with most of them being Mickey Rourke or Ray Winston. There are several examples of actors playing two different roles for Marvel, both within the MCU and without. Chris Evans, Michael B. Jordan, and Josh Brolin have all featured in Marvel movies from two different studios, but some actors have played two roles within the same franchise. Arguably the highest profile of these, or at least the most recent, is Gemma Chan. After portraying one of Carol's rivals, Minerva, in Captain Marvel, Chan returned to play the main role of Cersei in Eternals. Luke Cage boasted Alfre Woodard, who played Mariah Dillard, and in 2016 brought to Civil War the mother of Charlie Spencer, the young boy who inspired Tony to govern the Avengers with the Sokovia Accords, and of course Mahershala Ali as Cottonmouth. The Oscar winner will bring Blade to the big screen despite having already brought to life one of the strongest Netflix villains of the lot. While this can be irritating strictly based on visual continuity, the complete opposite can be just as bad. Number 4. Characters that don't look the same as before. There are several characters in the MCU that look exactly the same as other completely different characters, but the franchise also boasts examples where one character has radically changed appearance over the years and has been played by two or potentially more different actors. This could happen for any number of different reasons, though usually for the better. Don Cheadle is now one of the longest tenured actors in the franchise after replacing Terrence Howard in Iron Man 2. It's hard to imagine anyone else as Rhodey these days, and it's a similar story with Ed Norton, as the notoriously difficult to work with actor became difficult to work with and was ultimately replaced by Mark Ruffalo. Now Ruffalo, like Cheadle, is a mainstay of the franchise. Even though these two worked out, however, this kind of inconsistency is unreasonably irritating. It's even worse when such casting seems more arbitrary. After being portrayed by Abby Ryder Forster in Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp, Cassie Lang grew up in Endgame and was brought to life by Emma Thurman. Moving forward, however, she will be portrayed by Catherine Newton in Quantumania and Beyond. It makes no sense as to why one actress would be cast in 2019 only to be replaced for 2023 after just one small appearance. Number 3. One word. Back in 2015, both Wanda and Pietro Maximoff were introduced to the MCU, initially as enemies of the Avengers. They were part of Strucker's experiments with the Mind Stone and later joined forces with Ultron in an attempt to bring Earth's mightiest heroes down. There was a moment during Age of Ultron in which their tragic childhood was explained. Within war-torn Sokovia, the home of the Maximoffs was hit by a bomb. They were trapped for days waiting for this shell to go off, and though it didn't, they spent the entire time staring at it and waiting. On the side of the bomb was painted one word: Stark. Pietro was very specific about this, and it explained the twins' hatred for Iron Man nicely, but 6 years later in WandaVision, this was contradicted. When Agatha took Wanda through her past, the audience saw this scene play out for the very first time. The bomb was there, but there was not just one word painted, as had been confirmed 6 years earlier. It actually said Stark Industries, which is very definitely 2 words. It's not like Pietro would have forgotten, as he had looked at it for days on end. This was a ball dropped by WandaVision. Surely, if you're going to create a scene that has already been described, you should make sure you keep to that description. Number 2. Gamora's home planet. With Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014, the Marvel Cinematic Universe truly opened up the cosmic side of the franchise. The Thor movies had dabbled with the mysteries of outer space before, but Guardians changed the game, even with its main characters. Each of the 5 Guardians was utterly unique and from a different world, and when they were arrested on Xandar, they were given some exposition by the Nova Corps database. One of these nuggets of information was that Gamora was from Zen-Huberi, and was the last survivor of her kind. This was unquestioned at the time and even added to the badassery of her character. However, this became a problem when it was directly contradicted in Avengers Infinity War by Thanos himself. In something akin to validating his extreme methods to Gamora, the Mad Titan explained to her that since he slaughtered half of her home planet's population, the civilization was thriving. Obviously, this would be impossible if Gamora was the only one left, so either Thanos is lying, which Nebula confirmed in Endgame is something unimaginable, or the Nova Corps had false information, something that also seems unlikely. Number 1. Thanos' design. Alongside the likes of Iron Man, Captain America and Thor, it's not unreasonable to class Thanos among the biggest and best characters of the franchise. Avengers Infinity War was his movie, but before finally taking centre stage, his design was changed far too often. He was originally portrayed by Damien Poitier for the post-credit scene of The Avengers and was a very dark purple to the point that he was almost red. His look changed dramatically when he appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy, not only taking on an almost bluish hue, but a change of face while being brought to life by Josh Brolin. Once again, he changed for Infinity War with his now iconic and most famous look, but why did it take Marvel so long to settle on it? Clearly, it was decided he would be a huge part of the franchise as early as Phase 1, so why couldn't a set aesthetic be designed and kept to over the coming years? So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 more most annoying little inconsistencies in MCU history. Number 10. Peter Parker should have recognized Nick Fury, kind of. In spite of just being a teenage kid, Peter Parker loved referencing old sci-fi movies. His idea to get rid of Ebony Maw came from Alien, but it was Star Wars that was his and Ned's favourite. He tackled giant Ant-Man like an AT-AT, and he and his best friend spent far too much time and money on Star Wars Lego. And there's nothing wrong with that, until Peter comes into contact with someone who just so happens to look exactly like a character from his favourite movie franchise of all time. In Spider-Man Far From Home, Peter Parker for the first time crosses paths with Nick Fury. But if he's such a Star Wars fan, wouldn't he have had something to say about the fact that this new authority figure looks exactly like Mace Windu? Like, literally exactly. Samuel L. Jackson obviously played both roles, so Nick Fury doesn't just look similar to Master Windu, he looks identical. Marvel Studios making the Star Wars movies canon in the MCU meant that this dynamic didn't make much sense, unless Nick Fury had a secret previous life as an actor. But even then, Spider-Man would have certainly had something to say about it. Number 9. Andrew Garfield is not a kid. In 2021, the unthinkable happened. After the animated Into the Spider-Verse brought multiple Peter Parkers together from across the multiverse, the MCU brought Tom Holland's version of the character, together with that of both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Along with the previous Spider-Men came a smattering of villains from each franchise, including Jamie Foxx's Electro. He had gone up against Andrew Garfield's Spidey previously and did so once again on Earth 616 7 real-world years later. Their main interaction came when Peter 3 defeated Max Dillon, cured him, and revealed to him his true identity. Arguably, the main point of the conversations was for Max to seemingly tease Miles Morales by saying he expected Spider-Man to be black, but there were a couple of inconsistencies that it created. The first was that Max didn't already know Peter's identity, when the sole reason these 5 villains were brought across the MCU was that they supposedly did already know who Peter was. The other, which has much less impact on the movie, yet made fans scratched their heads even more was when Electro said Peter was just a kid. Just no. Tom Holland is just a kid. Andrew Garfield was almost 40 at the time. He may not look quite that old, but there is no one in the year 2021 that could possibly describe him as just a kid. Number 8. Valkyrie's name. It is common practice for most superheroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to assume their own alter ego, whether to protect their loved ones for the sake of being old-fashioned or just because of their ego. There was always a good reason for heroes to embrace their dual identity. This has never particularly been the case with most alien heroes. Thor just went by Thor, Gamora just went by Gamora, and Valkyrie just went by Valkyrie. The only problem with the latter, however, is that this isn't her name. This would be like people referring to Steve Rogers as Avenger as if it was his actual name. Thor once said that when he was a kid he wanted to be a Valkyrie, and Loki very clearly marked her as one of a group known as the Valkyries when he peered inside her mind. Her name has never been Valkyrie. She was a Valkyrie, and yet she has never been treated this way. Instead of anyone actually asking her name, she was just labelled as Valkyrie. Now this may have been her choice, as she was the last one remaining after the team's fight with Hela, but she doesn't exactly seem like the type to take an alias. Instead, it would make more sense for her to be the no-nonsense kind of hero who just wanted to turn up and do her job without adding any more drama or flash than necessary. Number 7. Tony's suits were destroyed, weren't they? It doesn't happen very often in the MCU, but there are moments, and sometimes even full movies, that would probably be best forgotten. The Incredible Hulk, it seems, even Marvel Studios would like to forget. But Iron Man 3 falls high on this list as well. Thanks to the huge Mandarin Trevor Slattery twist, the movie was almost universally hated by fans. But one of the biggest issues with the movie is that realistically, it doesn't matter. Looking back, there isn't really much about the movie that made a difference. To complete Tony Stark's solo trilogy, he decided that he didn't need to be Iron Man anymore. He destroyed all of his suits and had the shrapnel removed from his heart once and for all, so he no longer needed the arc reactor. However, this potentially big development for his character was completely undone, almost forgotten about even. In Age of Ultron, just 2 years later, Stark was back inside the Iron Man suit as if nothing happened, and as the years went by, he had arguably even more versions of his armor than ever before. It was never really mentioned why he went back on such a character-defining moment of destroying his Iron Man arsenal only to rebuild it again. Number 6. What exactly is Groot's backstory? Groot is one of the most interesting characters in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Since being introduced as Rocket's muscle in Guardians of the Galaxy, there has been relatively little revealed about him, but fans have fallen in love with him all the same. He is one of the most unique beings in the MCU. Or is he? In Infinity War, it was revealed that Thor spoke Groot after he was tortured as a child on Asgard. Clearly then, there are more Groots in the universe. Otherwise, why would the gods teach their children an entire language for one tiny being in the whole universe? However, this is thrown into question when you look back at Guardians of the Galaxy. Tanalea Tivan is an immeasurably old being in the universe, and his collection of living creatures suggests that he knows about even the rarest and most unique species across the galaxies. Why then didn't he know what Groot was? He had never seen anything like the character before, which seems unlikely given that he supposedly belongs to an entire race of Groots. How could someone like the Collector not know about a creature that every Asgardian child was potentially familiar with? Number 5. The Illuminati existed in Iron Man 2. One of the biggest revelations throughout Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was that there was an Illuminati team already established in another universe. Consisting of variant and new characters, this was huge, but it wasn't actually the first sight of the Illuminati in the MCU. With the franchise stretching for so long and across so many different franchises, there have been contradictions throughout. One of the biggest was that the Infinity Gauntlet had already been shown in Odin's treasure room long before Thanos had each recreated for him. Now this is something similar in that way back in Iron Man 2, eagle-eyed MCU fans spotted an app on Tony Stark's phone titled Illuminati. Now as far as we know, there is no Illuminati on Earth 616 yet. Though there may be, as it is a secret team after all, but even so, it was Doctor Strange's idea on Earth 838, not Tony Stark's. If this were to be Strange's idea in this universe as well, which it surely would be, hence the same name, why does Tony have it on his device several years before Stephen Strange even became a master of the mystic arts? Number 4. Janet van Dyne shouldn't have aged. Releasing in between Infinity War and Endgame, it seems that the main purpose, potentially the sole purpose, of Ant-Man and the Wasp was to introduce the concept of the quantum realm. The idea had been floated in the original movie, but this is where it was explored properly. Ultimately, Scott's knowledge and experience in the quantum realm is what led the Avengers down the route of the time heist, eventually defeating Thanos. Scott's idea stemmed from when he spent 5 years in the quantum realm, though to him it was just 5 hours. Unfortunately, this directly contradicted what fans saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp with regards to Janet van Dyne. She had been lost in the quantum realm when Hope was just a small girl 30 years earlier, and ultimately came out having aged 30 years. But if what Scott said was true, that 30 years to her would have been like 30 hours. Time moves differently down there, and while it would have been a painfully long 30 hours, it shouldn't have resulted in her aging so much. She essentially should have come out the same age as when she went in, rather than aging at the same rate as Hank. Number 3. How did T'Challa get the name Star-Lord? After Loki toyed with the concept of the multiverse, What If took MCU fans on a journey through just a handful of the infinite possibilities now open to the franchise. By just changing one tiny aspect, these universes could wind up drastically different to Earth 616. The second episode asked the question, what if Yondu picked up T'Challa instead of Peter Quill? It was a great episode, an interesting story, and for the most part at least, it made sense. It was understandable why the Ravagers went to Wakanda, but why would T'Challa have called himself Star-Lord? The name didn't come to Peter Quill from Yondu or his crew. If it did, there would have been no problem. However, young Peter Quill was given the name Star-Lord by his mother, before he was ever taken off-planet by Yondu. How on earth then did T'Challa wind up with the same name a completely random woman from Missouri gave her son on the other side of the world? It's a tiny detail with little consequence, but it is a frustrating blemish on an otherwise strong episode of What If. Number 2. Why did Wanda choose Earth 838? From her cruel childhood in which her parents and her home were taken away from her, to losing vision to Thanos during the Battle of Wakanda, Wanda Maximoff lost just about everything she loved in her life. In Westview, she created twin boys, but even they too were lost to her. As the villain in the Multiverse of Madness, Wanda's entire arc was about getting back her children. She would do anything to be a mother again, including abusing America Chavez's power to travel to another universe, and in theory, taking that Wanda's place. Within the multiverse, there are literally infinite universes, meaning there is, in theory, a universe for every single possibility. So why would Wanda choose Earth 838? Yes, this was a universe where Billy and Tommy were alive, but her boys weren't the only thing she lost. Why wouldn't she have looked for a universe in which both the twins and Vision were still alive? Not only was she forced to kill him herself to try and save the universe, she had to watch as Thanos undid what she had done, only to kill him all over again. It makes no sense that her love wasn't even considered when she chose the new universe in which she wanted to live. Number 1. Earth 616 designation. Every Marvel Comics fan knows that the main original universe is Earth 616. Though there have been other universes and of course wars between universes, everything always comes back to Earth 616. For many years there had never been any real confirmation in the movies in which version of Earth the MCU was based. Understandable, as it is only recently that the concept of multiple universes has been brought to the franchise. But in the Multiverse of Madness, Christine Palmer, 838, confirmed that the main MCU continuity is 616. Aside from the fact that she appears to be assigning universes numbers at random rather than in any kind of logical order, this forces fans to question something Quentin Beck said in Spider-Man Far From Home. Back when he was pretending to be from another universe, the man known as Mysterio also referred to our Peter Parker's world as 616. Since Beck was little more than a pissed-off man with a lot of drones in his arsenal, how in any way could he have known that this was the case? He would have just been picking a number at random to further sell his illusion, and it just so happens that he chose exactly the right designation. It just doesn't make sense.